Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. When he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny.
If you don't mend it, I'm going to bone your dog.
So I wanted to do a quick video discussing the sacking of Jeremy Clarkson from BBC. From what I understand, he punched a producer, and that's obviously a problem, and I can understand they're wanting to show that they're not going to treat him any differently from anyone else. So I can understand exactly where they're coming from. At the same time, as a fan, I'm obviously disappointed that that's happened, but it is it's something that Clarkson has done that is unfortunate, and it's a shame that whatever happens to the show happens to the show. What I do find interesting, and that I think that the Clarkson situation is a great example of, is potentially the fact that there's either two options. We either accept this behaviour, or we condemn it completely. There's no real opportunity to correct the behaviour. Now, it may be that in Clarkson's case this was a regular thing, as opposed to him just generally being uncooperative, and then he's crossed some sort of a line here. And also, in Clarkson's position, I assume he's got a fairly good nest egg, and he doesn't necessarily need the job at Top Gear in order to survive. But it does raise the question of how one might treat those that are a little more disadvantaged and don't have the sort of resources that Clarkson has. Will they be as willing to essentially throw them to the wolves? To suddenly lose your job and not be able to correct that, it's the scenario where these broken men are really being discarded and written off, and that's what I find troubling about this. If they are willing to write off Jeremy Clarkson, who is worth many millions of dollars to the BBC, because he is a huge factor in what made Top Gear successful. If they're willing to do that, they're certainly going to dismiss anyone lower than that on the scale of BBC. So we're not in a position where we are offering assistance or rehabilitation to people who clearly have some sort of problem that should be, for the benefit of society, addressed. Now, maybe Clarkson is unfixable. Maybe he is just going to be that way. However, he did seem remorseful, and that generally provides at least an avenue for rehabilitation, if such a thing is even what you would call it in this sort of context. So anyone who makes this sort of mistake, yes, is definitely hurting people. Physically, that's a problem. But when they're thrown out and they're not given the assistance that is needed in order to make them better people, to correct their mistakes, to enable them to learn from the experience, the pressure piles on and you're only going to create a more violent person. This is probably not going to be the case with Clarkson because, as I've said, I assume, and this isn't necessarily the case, that he has some sort of a nest egg saved up, that he hasn't blown all his money on various cars, but instead that he is financially fine. But what about those that are not? So they face new pressures, and if you were of a violent tendency, if you did have violent urges, I know that I've certainly wanted to throw a punch at a boss before. I didn't, because I know that was wrong. But certainly if that comes up a lot and you're in an environment where there's more stress, it has the opposite effect, I think, that you will find yourself more likely to actually exercise violence because you feel that is the only way that you have left to control your surroundings. Anyway, it was just a pretty quick video about that. I'm curious to see where they go with this. I would like to see some more options for rehabilitation. Certainly, it wouldn't surprise me if this was actually put on the table and Clarkson refused. Certainly, his personality would fit the story. That doesn't mean that happened. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's pure speculation. But it would definitely be good to see people that need it to be given the help that they need to continue their jobs. And if you're not willing to give it to someone like Clarkson, it definitely says that you're not going to give it to anyone who is maybe worth less in the eyes of the BBC. Okay, that's it for now. Have a fantastic day.
I'd have them all shot. I would take them outside and execute them in front of their families. I mean, how dare they go on strike when they've got these gilt-edged pensions that are going to be guaranteed while the rest of us have to work for a living.
Just listening to the Radio 5 Live there, and they're talking about Jeremy Clarkson. People sending in emails. They are wetting them. They have lost it. They're like, don't let Jeremy Clarkson go. If Jeremy Clarkson is gone by the BBC, he's one of us. He's a great British icon. He's loved. He's absolutely adored by millions across the country. The Sun, he is a great British hero. He is a national treasure. He is like David Cameron, Nigel Farage, Jimmy Savile, Winston Churchill, Enoch Powell, Oswald Mosley. He's there. He's one of us. He's a champion. He's a bigot, a racist. He said he wanted to drag the nurses out and in front of their families, put a gun to their head and shoot them dead in front of their families. Go on strike. See, this is the culture that we live in. How do people like Farage, Nigel Farage, Jeremy Clarkson, how do they get a platform? How do they get it? Because it's about right-wing white extremism. You see, we have an all-white government, all-male government, all-rich government, a HSBC, a banking-loving, tax-avoiding. Don't give your money to the poor, give it to the millionaires. And they do it. They do it by fueling racism, extremism. They do it. They do it with the likes of Jeremy Clarkson. Can you imagine someone on telly, on national telly, saying drag out a nurse in front of their family? A nurse? on 7 o'clock, and drag them out, stick them, put a gun to their head, and shoot them dead. Dead! Because that's what they deserve. Because this is the culture. This is the culture. This is the testosterone male. These are the great British icons. How do they get a platform? They get a platform because they're so endearing. Like Jimmy Savile. They were saying to Jeremy Clarkson, you got one more chance. One more chance. No more Welsh gags. No more gags about Mexicans. No more saying anything. No more punch. He just punched someone. 2 episodes ban. You can come back after the election. He's a neighbour. He's a friend of David Cameron's. You know, like Jimmy Savile was a friend of Thatcher and a friend of all the Conservatives, like Nigel Farage. They're all mates. They're all mates. Are you one of them? Is that what you see? If you're part of that, you know, you're caught up in their propaganda because they want to drag you. That's the whole Sun. That's what they do. They don't care about people. If they care, do you think they care about normal, decent people? Like in Hillsborough, they don't care about people. They don't care about workers. They care about the rich. And it's their insidious. You know, let's pick on the most vulnerable people in our society. Let's laugh at them. Let's joke about them. Don't be PC. Now, I hate all that PC. You know, and people get dragged with that because they're part of a misogynistic, you know, racist, homophobic, hating society that would rather beat down on nurses. You know, the nurses are our mums, our sisters, our friends. You know, people that are working, working class people. You know, they're against all of that. They like that culture, that ignorant, bigoted culture. You know, Nigel Farage is a tool. You know, like Clarkson, like David Cameron.
Jeremy Clarkson,
who died today.
It was only this week that Jeremy Clarkson was appearing on Top Gear. Born Jeremy Clarkson was famed principally for his habit of prizing a 42-inch waist into 24-inch jeans, a practice that led to his being nicknamed the human toffee apple. Some called him arrogant, loud-mouthed, testosterone-crazed and vain. Others described him as a human soap on a rope with brute aftershave for blood. His critics were less generous. Some suggested his cars were simply penis substitutes. Psychologists cruelly pointed out that a complete and utter dick had no need for penis substitutes. But it was Clarkson's total lack of intelligence for which he will be best known. Most memorably, he once telephoned the police to report the theft of his radio, his dashboard, and even his gear stick. It later emerged that he'd failed to realise he'd been sitting in the back seat. Clarkson's first TV appearance, age 11, was on Southern Television's programme My Ambition, where he asked to be a crash test dummy. This ambition was fulfilled, and Clarkson became a professional test dummy until he retired at the age of 25. The resultant brain damage led naturally to local radio, and from there to network television. Viewers found it tragic to watch a man of such restricted vocabulary using ever wilder and more inappropriate analogies week after week.
This is espresso. Now, that's like the Corrado. One shot of it and it blows your head off. Then we've got instant coffee, the Vauxhall Calibra. And here at the end, filter coffee. Does the job, hits the spot. It's the Ford Probe.
Tragically, Jeremy was trapped in the 1970s, reliving in his mid-40s the glamorous adolescence he wanted, but never had. But the nation will never forget the shameful expose on the Roger Cook programme in which he caught the middle-aged Clarkson enacting an embarrassing adolescent fantasy in front of his bedroom mirror, playing the air guitar and pretending to be Mark Knopfler. It was his reckless disregard for his own safety that led to his tragic death.
I feel a race coming on.
Determined to be in shot at all times, he strapped a TV camera to his car windscreen and talked directly into it while driving instead of looking at the road like a normal person. The end was inevitable. He leaves a gross of 24-inch waist jeans, a collection of Dire Straits records, and a delighted nation. Jeremy Clarkson, who died